you didn't know you were going to come to church to party today, but we are. We're looking at my favorite chapter in the whole Bible, containing what I think is the best verse in the whole Bible, from Luke chapter 15, and it's a chapter about parties. And so we're going to get into that here. If you have a Bible or a phone or something to read Scripture with, it'd be great if you read along. I'm going to read the first two parables, and then we're going to be digging into the third parable as the sermon progresses. But Luke chapter 15, starting with the first verse. Okay, everybody got their tools for the sermon? Okay, let me hear you just so you know how to use your tool. It sounds like a wounded duck, is what it sounds like. But, okay. Thank you all for jumping in there. Okay, we're going to get ready to look at Luke 15 right now and get into this. Luke 15, starting with verse 1. And before we do read it, though, I do want to offer you this blessing. The Lord be with you. Luke 15, verse 1. Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. "Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after that lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home, and then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me.'" Good job. I didn't think that I might have to put some parameters on the use of these horns, but... And then verse 7, "I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 who do not need to repent." You're getting the party tone. I like it. Or verse 8, "Suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp and sweep the house and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and says, 'Rejoice with me, I found my lost coin.'" Okay, and Leah was saying, "You don't know how to party." But here we go. Verse 10, "In the same way I tell you, there's more rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." Okay, so today we are going to be thinking about finding lost things. And I'm wondering if any of you here have ever lost any of these things up here. We tried to make a list of all the things we could imagine losing. Have you lost any? Talk to your neighbor and tell them which of these things on this list you have lost most frequently, or maybe most recently. Okay, I'm judging by the sound of things. You all can relate. You've all lost something, right? And you could probably add things to this list of other things that you've lost. I had this experience Wednesday morning. I threw back the shower curtain to get into the shower, and there, sitting on the bathtub, was a half-consumed bottle of Diet Dr. Pepper. And so I grabbed it, and I went out into the living room, and I said to Mary, "Look what I just found in the bathtub." And she goes, "Oh, I've been looking for that." Ever lose a bottle of soda in the bathtub? That's a first. Okay, so of course I wanted to know what the statisticians say about this, so I went and looked it up, and they estimate that we spend 2.5 days every year looking for lost things. Okay, so that means, and the things that we're most likely to lose are phones, keys, wallets, and sunglasses. Those are the top 4. Which means that all of us will spend at least 6 months of our life looking for lost things. And I don't know about you, but our reaction to finding a lost thing varies depending on how long it's been lost and maybe depending on the value of what was lost. I can remember, this was quite a few years ago, but I had gone to the bank and I had gotten out some money, cash, and I actually put it in my wallet, and then I went to Walmart and I bought some stuff, and then Mary and I went to Waterloo. And on the way to Waterloo, I go, I don't have my wallet. And she goes, well, when's the last time you had it? And I said, at Walmart. And I think I laid it in my cart when I checked out, laid it in the basket. Oh my gosh, there was this panic, a call to Walmart while we're driving, and then they didn't have it. Of course, if I left my thing in the basket of the cart in the Walmart parking lot, am I ever going to find this back? Probably not. When we got home, my wallet was on the dresser. Yeah, right. Okay. You get the spirit of things. If you've lost something that was really important, this might be your attitude. And there's supposed to be a clap that goes with this too, but I am so uncoordinated I can't get the clap in. Leah was just doing I'm like, I don't know how to clap to this song, but anyway. Okay, now note to sound tech, because the audience participation is so great, we might have to really crank it up the next time I hit that song. I don't know. That was better than I anticipated. Okay. Jesus describes this kind of happiness over finding lost things in Luke 15. And when we get to the next parable that starts in Luke, it's about the parable that many of us have heard of, and it starts this way. It says, there was a man who had 2 sons. You know this story, right? Okay, and this is how it starts. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So the father divided his property between them, and then not long after that, the younger son got together all that he had, and he set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. I think I always point out the King James version of this verse because I love the way it says it. It said he went to a far-off country and squandered his money on riotous living. Doesn't that just give you a feeling? The prodigal son. Prodigal, wasteful, reckless extravagance. This is the son who goes off to this far-off country and he gets thoroughly lost. Okay? In about every way imaginable, he gets lost. And this is how it's described. Oops, I missed a verse. Anyway, here's the next verse, verse 14. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. And he longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So he lost everything. He lost his money, he lost his friends, and now he's actually in real danger of losing his life because he's starving to death. And then Jesus describes him as coming to his senses, which means that he finally faces the truth of the situation. He finally recognizes what's really going on. He's broke. He's friendless. He's living in a far-off, distant, strange land. He's been reduced to skin and bones. He's a loser. He's nothing. This big scheme he had to go off and get away from his father has backfired, and now he's failed. He realizes that the hired servants in his father's house are better off than him because they at least are not lost. They know where they're at. And so this is what he decides. He decides, I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your servants. This is the speech that he's going to give. He's rehearsing it. So this verse 20 says he got up and he went back to his father. And I imagine that as he's going back, he's practicing this speech of confession. I've sinned against heaven. I've sinned against you. I'm not worthy. Make me one of your hired servants. Well, as I'm listening to this speech, I think, well, he hasn't been a worthy son for quite a while, right? I mean, he wished his father's dead. That's what it meant when he said, give me my inheritance. I wish you were dead. Give me my inheritance. And then he goes off and does this crazy stuff. But at least at this point in the parable, it seems to be unfolding about as we expected, right? Because we expect if you're prodigal, if you're reckless, you go off in this way, you're going to come to ruin. Your life is going to be bad. And you're going to realize your mistake. You're going to realize that you shouldn't have done this. And the son appears ready to make it right. He wants to get found. He appears ready to face the music. And this is how I've always interpreted this parable, that this is like a big turning point in the son, that this coming to his senses is actually a big change. But now, we've been studying parables. And if there's anything we've learned in our parable studies in the past weeks is that they're not always as expected. Things don't always turn out as it seems. Parables open the door to much speculation. And so I was curious about what other people had speculated about this coming to the senses moment. Was this a good thing, or what was happening here? And I came across a couple of interesting perspectives on it. One of them is from a guy named Frederick Buechner, and he describes what happened this way. He says the son gets a job on a pig farm and keeps it long enough to observe the pigs are getting a better deal than he is. And so he decides to go home. There's nothing edifying about this decision, according to Buechner. He says there's no indication that he thinks of his old man as anything more than a meal ticket. There's no sign he's really sorry for what he's done or that he's resolved to make amends somehow and do something better next time. He decides to go home for the simple reason that he knows that he always got 3 squares a day at home, and so do the servants. There's no danger of starving to death if he goes home, and that's enough reason to go home. Come to your senses. I thought that was an interesting perspective. And then I came across a sermon by William Willimon. I've heard this sermon years ago, and I found it again. It's one of the best sermons I've ever heard on Luke 15. If you're curious, look up William Willimon, Duke University Chapel, Luke 15, and you should get to it. But this is what he said about this point in this story. He said this: the little wretch thinks he can fall back to strategic position B and be one of his father's hired servants. You see, though the boy is lost, he's still busy wheeling and dealing, making plans and falling back to another position and writing speeches of confession. Early it was give me, give me, give me. Now it's make me, make me, make me. Like, wow, they're kind of hard on that son, aren't they? And most of us don't want to read the story this way. I know I don't. I want to read the story as like, well, bad boy sees the error of his ways and comes to his senses and like repents and goes home, right? That's the way I've always thought. We want him down on his knees confessing his sin as a condition of getting back with his father, as a condition of going home. We want him crawling back to face the music. That's how I want this son. Now I'm not sure if that's how he was. And the reason I want it that way is because this would make a really good moral to the story. Don't blow it all on booze and women, right? You'll come to ruin, come to nothing. And to be honest, I'm wondering if this is probably how most preachers want this passage to go, and probably how most parents want this passage to go, because we want a good moral to tell our kids, right? Probably how most parishioners want it, because we're good, righteous, upstanding people. We want there to be consequences when someone screws up. It's definitely how the Pharisees wanted it. That's why this whole thing got started, right? Because the Pharisees are complaining, why are you eating with these people? But this is a parable, and in parables, God seems to have a thing for turning our expectations on their heads. And God also seems to have a thing in a lot of these parables for losers. He's got a thing for those who come to nothing, for those who are sinners. God has a thing for the lost, and so does Jesus, apparently. Which brings us to what I think is one of the best verses in the whole Bible, Luke 15:20. This is the punchline of the whole parable. We talked about punchlines. This is the punchline. So he got up and he went to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to him, and he threw his arms around him and kissed him. Yeah, you got it. You guys inspire me so much that we're going to have to do this full blown. Here we go. Okay, crank it up this time, all right? Woo, good job. Some of you people got some very good rhythm over there. I really appreciate that. Good job. The Father responds with this utter extravagance. It's unbelievable that he would respond this way. I mean, there's a lot of other sources I would recommend for this. Tim Keller wrote a great little book called Prodigal God. If you want to know this parable in depth, I highly recommend that book, Prodigal God by Tim Keller. He points out that this father is prodigal because he like has to hike up his robes to go running to the son to meet him. No father ever does that. There's no circumstance in which any father in this culture would ever hike up his robes and expose his legs and then run off after this son who's been so bad. It's utterly extravagant. But then it gets even more extravagant. He doesn't even wait for the son's confession. He doesn't even let him get this little speech that he's prepared out. He just goes right into what's going to happen next, and this is what he says. He says to his servants, "Quick! Bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast. Let's celebrate." Yeah. And why the rejoicing? Because this son of mine was dead, and now he's alive. He was lost, but now he's fine, so they began to celebrate. Woo! Okay, so I timed this sermon out without all the noise, so if we go long, it's all on you today, okay? Now, some of the Bible versions, maybe the version you're reading, says this about the celebration. It says, they began to make merry, and I love that version. They like making merry. Doesn't that create an image in your mind? This rejoicing, this celebration, like everybody's all in on this. There's no holds barred. We're just going to like celebrate this because it's such a great thing. And the rejoicing starts immediately. The other extravagant thing about the Father's reaction here is that there's no gap between the reunion and the party. It just comes right away. There's no time for the son to prove himself, to verify that his confession is genuine. There's no time for him to demonstrate that he's going to make things right now, that he's going to get in line with the program, that he's going to fall into place. There's no intermediate steps. They go right into making merry, right into celebrating. And I got to tell you, this can be maddening. This is sometimes the punchlines in the parables are like maddening. But the father's so happy that the prodigal's home that he can't wait. In fact, my speculation about why the father saw the son while he was still a long way off, remember that? He said, while he was still a long way off, he saw him, was because that the father had a routine. And that routine was every day, he's going out there and he's scanning the horizon. Maybe today is the day that prodigal returns. Maybe it's today. That every day, the father, every opportunity he had, he would look out on the horizon, hoping to see this familiar figure coming back toward him. And finally, one day it happened. And he's so overjoyed. He's so happy. The prodigal can't be a servant. He's not going to make him a servant because he's a son. He can't confess anything because he's already forgiven. He can't do anything to get back into his father's good graces because his father is like Mr. Grace. He's like lavish in his extension of forgiveness. And so he's not that interested in his speech at all. Because the dead is alive, the lost is found. And that's all we need to know to make merry. The father calls the servants together and says, "Hey, let's have a party." Now, you guys are like anticipating it. I love it. Okay. Of course, this party is only the final of 3 parties that happened in this passage, right? The first party is when the lost sheep is found, right? Put it on your shoulders, take it back, call the neighbors. I found my sheep. Party, they celebrate. And then the next one is the lost coin is found. Sweep the whole house, find the coin, and celebrate. And then the lost boy is found. Now, Jesus hammers home the idea that when God finds the lost, the mood is a party mood. That's the mood. And he actually makes a point of saying that this mood isn't just a party mood here, it's a party mood in heaven too, right? Can you imagine the angels with party horns? Huh? All of heaven is rejoicing every time the lost person is found. There's more joy, they say, over one lost person who's found than over all of you all sitting here with your horns. Yeah? This is the mood that comes. And Jesus is very clear about this. The party is central. God actually seems to get kind of goofy in like he's saying, drop everything else. And this really seems something because you go, really, do you want to use the kingdom resources for this? It's just a sheep. And one of the commentators pointed out that actually nobody would ever do this, right? You got 99 sheep. You're going to leave them unattended. And I always, in my mind, reading this like, oh yeah, the 99, they're in a pen, they're safe, they're okay. We don't have to worry about the 99. But they're not. They're out in the open like everybody. But they're together. So he leaves the 99 sheep together, and he goes off looking for this one. So that means he's got 99% of his resources there. 1% of his resources are lost. Nobody goes looking for that lost sheep. And then when you find it, nobody throws a party. And then another commentator speculated about the coin in that, you know what? She probably spent more on the celebrating of finding the coin than the coin was worth. I never thought of that before. He's going like, oh, you find a quarter and then you find, oh, everybody, come on over here. Let's have drinks and celebrate and make merry because I found my quarter. It's extravagant. But this is the party's key in this chapter. The father says again, quick, bring the best robe, put it on him. There's actually more words, if you count the words, and break it into categories of details in this parable. There's more words given to detail the description of the party than any other piece of the parable. So that gets more press than everything else. Quick, bring the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger, put sandals on his feet, bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for the son of mine was dead and he's alive again. He's lost and he's found. So they began to celebrate. And this is extravagance. I'm thankful to this sermon from William Willimon for this little insight, because he said this. He says, the extravagance of this party might be a little embarrassing to us who regularly come to church with all of our serious speeches about what great big serious sinners we are. Or maybe we come with our speeches thanking God for what big sinners we are not. And then he goes to say, we should not be surprised to find out that God really isn't that much into speeches. He's way more into parties. He's way more into celebrating. Okay, let's do it. Oh, wait. Now let's do it. Okay. Okay, There's three characters in the chapter 15 of Luke. There's three characters who do not get into the celebrating. They don't make merry. They're not happy with the party, okay? The shepherd parties, the woman parties, the neighbor's party, the father parties, the servant's party, and the lost son parties. Who doesn't party in this chapter? The older brother doesn't party. And then the characters that set it up right at the beginning, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they don't party. They're like, what's going on here? In fact, let's look at this verse 25. Oh, I must have missed a slide again. Is there a slide for verse 25 and 26? They gave me the clicker thinking that I would be able to have better control over this than... Now you see what a big job that is they do, okay? Meanwhile, the older brother was out in the field, and when he came near to the house, he heard all these... And he's like, what is going on here? There's music and there's dancing. So he called one of the servants over and he says, what's going on? He's not happy about this. The son is all serious. He's all business. And so you can picture this, right? He stomps up on the porch and he's like angry. Music and dancing, and who turned these musicians loose? Merrymaking and extravagant expense in the middle of the week? What is this, he says. What are you doing in a dinner jacket when you're supposed to be in your overalls out cleaning out the barn? Why are you here? And the servant says to him, well, your younger brother came back and your father proclaimed it party time, merrymaking. That's what he said. And then the son, the older brother, says, a party? Really? And this is an imagination, but I imagine he says something like, doesn't that old fool know we've got work to do? We got things we have to attend to. We got business to take care of. Doesn't that guy know that? Why would he do this? And the conclusion of the matter with the older brother ends this way. The older brother became angry and he refused to go in. He was not going to be part of it. He was not going to blow his horn. There's no way. And he actually does something that's quite rude. He makes the father come out to him. So now the father has to go out on the porch to deal with this angry brother in the middle of this celebration. Quit his merrymaking to go deal with this. And the father actually, when asked why we're celebrating, he gives the same reason to the older brother. He says, we had to celebrate. So there's the end of the story, right? They're in there making merry, and he's out on the porch angry, okay? Where are you in the story? We said most of these parables are such good stories because they force us to locate ourselves somewhere. We find ourselves in here and we go, oh, who am I in this? Which character do you think I am? And we know that God's the Father. Are you the merrymakers, the friends or the neighbors coming there just to celebrate? Are you the prodigal son who's come home to be welcomed into this celebration? Or are you the older brother or the Pharisee? Before you answer that, let's revisit our whole big idea about treasure hunting. Because we've been looking for many weeks at this idea of saying, well, there's this immense treasure of immeasurable value out there, and we're trying to figure out what it is and how do we get it, and then what do we do with this treasure once we have it? That's what we've been trying to figure out. And so I want you to imagine that you found this treasure. Now you have it. You've been a successful treasure hunter. You have this massive fortune, this massive valuable thing. It doesn't compare to anything else on earth. So what would you do with your treasure? How would you spend it? Of course, you might spend it celebrating, and there's some worthy things that we normally would celebrate, right? Like maybe you'd celebrate a wedding. We blow lots of treasure on weddings and celebrate, big party and all that. Maybe graduation. Some of us have been to some graduation parties or thrown those parties here recently, and we just do it because it's what you do, but there's cost, there's a big cost to that, and we go, it's worth it. We want to celebrate graduation. Or maybe we celebrate a new baby. The baby's coming today. That's my prediction, so. We already have a car loaded with really cute baby things ready to go. Okay? Because that's what you do. You celebrate a new baby or maybe a promotion or other key events in your life we celebrate. But what about this? Would you spend a wad of your treasure celebrating the finding of a lost sheep or the finding of a lost coin or the finding of a lost son? How much of your treasure would you want to leverage for that? And if you don't think it's worth it to spend all that you have to celebrate the finding of lost things, then you might be one of the older brothers of this world. As for Jesus, he finds lost things, and then he celebrates. And we know what Jesus was willing to pay to celebrate lost things. He was willing to give it all, every last drop of his blood, to pay the price so that lost things could be found. In fact, Jesus says, this is what I do. This is my mission, he says. Okay, I think I'm out of order. There it is. Remember this verse? He had to seek and save that which was lost, because lost things need to be found. And when lost things are found, they need to be celebrated. That's what you do. The main issue in Luke 15 is lostness, which it takes an interesting turn, because at the very beginning of this parable, it doesn't look like it's going to be about lostness. It looks like the main issue is going to be between sin and righteousness. That's how it's set up. Remember, these sinners come to sit with Jesus and eat with him, and the righteous Pharisees and teachers of the law, they're mad, they're angry about it, grumbling about it. So it looks like, okay, this is what's going to happen. Now Jesus is going to tell us a little parable, and the main point is going to be about whether you're a sinner or whether you're righteous. And then Jesus doesn't do that at all. He tells a parable and takes us in a completely different direction, so that now what we're talking about is being found. And the joy that comes with being found. And the party and celebration that comes. There's interesting, know this much about eating in this culture. Eating was not just like, hey, let's go grab a snack and then I'll see you later. Eating in this culture is like sharing fellowship. It's like saying, I accept you. It's a sign of camaraderie. It's a sign of true friendship. By eating with tax collectors and sinners, Jesus demonstrates that he accepts them, and nobody else in the society did. Certainly not the righteous, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law and the older brothers. So this is another place where there's some rub created by this parable, because the Bible describes a sinner as a person who has such a persistent pattern of sinning. It's so habitual that they're in this sin that everybody knows about it. You're the sinner. Similarly, the righteous doesn't mean those people who are perfect or self-righteous, but rather it means those people who are actively trying to live up to the law. They're trying to do what the law says, and it's such a habitual thing, everybody knows they're doing this. Okay? So that means that Jesus said, I'm going to welcome those who are habitually sinning, who nobody else will welcome. And not only am I going to welcome that, I'm going to take this kingdom treasure and I'm going to spend that treasure on them for a party. That's what they're going to do. And he actually doubles down on it, welcoming sinners and the lost. Okay, so I don't know where you're at on this question or where you find yourself in this parable, but I'm going to give you a couple of next steps just to consider. First of all, you can take your horns home, and one of your next steps might be just, celebrate sometime this week. Maybe you can do that while reading through Luke 15. So we did something different on the handout, and if you didn't grab one on the way in, you can grab it on the way out. It's the whole chapter with a place for notes. And I'm going to suggest that a good next step for us might be this. Take this little paper with Luke 15 and read it every day this week. And then jot down little notes of what you think God is telling you about that. That'd be a great way to celebrate this week, Luke 15. And then celebrate finding something or finding someone. And I would suggest this as a next step. Even if you don't feel like it, if you find something that's lost and you've been mad or you're angry and you're like, oh, frustrated, I'm just glad I found it. Then blow your horn and celebrate, even if you don't feel like it. Or if you find someone who was lost, celebrate it, even if you're tempted to be stomping up on the porch all mad. Blow your horn instead and try to celebrate. That's a couple of next steps. Okay, so we've all been groping around in the dark, trying to locate lost keys or sunglasses or receipts or credit cards or whatever, and we all know the joy of finding them. It's at least a relief, but usually it's great joy. So imagine the joy that comes when the one who is truly lost is found. Does that make you happy? It makes Jesus happy, and so I think we should celebrate one more time.